Hello, I'm SB Moores. I wanted to make another video about Malazan. Um, this will be 3 days in a row of uploads. I have a lot to talk about with Malazan since I've read three of these books in the last several months alone, and I hope to be finishing it by the end of the year. I have a feeling that that's unlikely as time goes on, just because I essentially have close to 3,000 pages to read in the next 4 weeks. And I think I'm a fast reader for the most part, but I don't know if I'm quite that fast. And I like to have a little bit of time to digest what I read as well, in between the books, and sometimes from a chapter to chapter basis, especially with Toll the Hounds. Toll the Hounds has been very thick, is how I'll put it. I've had a lot to think about while reading it, and I'm not always as excited to read one chapter as I am the other. Which, if you've read Toll the Hounds, you've probably felt the same thing, maybe, or you didn't. I mean, I like all the chapters, but today in specific, I wanted to make a post about one of my favorite scenes in the series, and one of my favorite scenes in Reaper's Gale, um, that occurs during chapter 18. This is kind of a little bit of a repost from a post that I made on the Malazan subreddit a while back, regarding the exact same scene, but I know that not everybody uses the Malazan subreddit. I didn't for the longest time. I only started using it a couple months ago when I started reading Midnight Tides, and because I have no one else to, I don't know anybody in my life who reads Malazan, and no one will read it for the life of me. So that's the next best place. But I figured that a YouTube video about the same thing would be pretty good for anybody who doesn't use the subreddit or has not seen that post. Uh, the scene in particular occurs during chapter 18 of Reaper's Gale. If you have a Tor trade paperback like I do, this all scuffed up one that had the entire cover bent in half by me in my sleep. It's on page 812. The vignette the scene is in starts on page 800, but this is where it becomes really interesting in my opinion. But a little bit of background. This chapter starts off from the perspective of Triban Gnol, the Chancellor of the Empire, the secret emperor in disguise, really. He's the one running everything, through roulette, kind of circumventing him. But this chapter starts off with Triban Gnol and Hanan Mosag having a meeting with the Emperor, and Hanan Mosag is trying to sway him in a specific way to aid him in the Teist Eder, even if Hanan Mosag doesn't truly wish anything well for Rulad, whereas Triban Gnol is trying to distract the Emperor and get him to do what he wants. And it seems Triban Gnol succeeds because he informs him of the coming Malazan invasion, which completely takes all of his attention, knowing that an empire is coming to smite theirs. And he also gives him the idea that they could open diplomatic relations with the this Malazan empire, which is really ironic when you think about it, because the Bone Hunters are acting completely MIA for the Empire. I don't think anybody in the Central Malazan Empire has any idea where the Malazans, where the Bone Hunters went after they fled. They might have a general direction, but they don't even know this continent exists from what we've gathered. So, or any of the people on it, and vice versa, obviously. But what occurs afterward is the Chancellor goes back to his room rather satisfied, and then Karos Invictad shows up to question him about the whereabouts of Bruthen Trana, who, as we know later in the book, or I think it happened, we know about it before this, yes, is dead. He went off to go on a quest for Brisbedict for Hanan Mosag, where Hanan Mosag then killed him, leaving his corporeal body dead and his incorporeal body wandering the seabed. But which was rather sad for me. I like Bruthen Trana. And obviously Karos Invictad wants him because Bruthen Trana stood up to him and went into the head of the Patriotists building next to the Eternal Domicile, and for a lack of a better term, beat the crap out of him. Almost beat him to death, Karos Invictad, which wouldn't that have been just right after what he did to Nissal? I think it was Nissal. But obviously because of the fickleness of the politicking and the power dynamics between everybody, Trana was incapable of doing that at that moment. And he needed more to sway the emperor to his side. But obviously, that never happened with Trana anyway. Um, but that's why Karos Invictad wants him, because he's been given leave and permission to go hunt Teist Eder as insurrectionists and traitors to the Empire now as well. And he questions Triban Gnol about his whereabouts. Triban Gnol says it doesn't matter. He waves him off, very dismissive. And then Karos Invictad shows a little more of his true colors and the personality he's gained in recent times. I mean, he's had it for the whole book that we've been reading, but I'm guessing that he learned more of this in recent times based off of some other dialogue. Um, he threatens him. He takes his scepter and slams it down on his desk, and then he proceeds to call him a little piece of shit and says that he wants him. He starts yelling at him, and they get into a little back and forth fight. And that's really the crux of what I wanted to talk about, because this scene in particular really struck me when I read it. And then I sort of forgot about it for a little bit, and my thoughts on it ebbed and flowed for a while. And then about 2 weeks after I finished the book, one night I was just thinking, and this scene and Karos and Invictad really um, stepped back into my mind, and I thought about it a little more, and I reread it, and there was one line in particular towards that beginning part of this interaction between the two that really stuck with me, that I think sets the tone perfectly, that I'm going to read real quick since it's only one line. But this is right after the scepter cracks down on Triban. This is right after Karos Invictad slams his scepter. And then it goes, Karos Invictad leaned far forward, seeking an imposing, threatening posture that, alas, failed. The man was, simply put, too small, which is one of the best lines I think I've ever read. And one of the reasons for that is because of both the lack of subtlety and also the lack of, I shouldn't say lack of depth, but the lack of nuance maybe that it had, because instead it's just great writing in my opinion, because instead of going into all these micro details about specific things in his posture, anything like that, or about anything like his expression, about Karos Invictad, or maybe more ethereal, ephemeral ideas about the power dynamic between the two before this. Instead, the man was, simply put, too small for Triban Gnol to be threatened by him. I think it's said that Triban Gnol's a rather tall man, especially among the Lethari. Rather bony fingers. I mean, his hands are talked about a lot. But I remember reading that, and it really, it was funny to me, because I originally thought that when he did that, it was going to be a long-winded explanation, possibly, about how the power dynamic between the two is shifting in that particular moment. But it's really one of those show don't tell moments, because it is just we get told that his posture fails, and that's about it. We're told that his sweat glistens on his beady brow, and he's slightly pudgy, I believe, which is probably that's probably a detail to show how the patriotists are sort of gorging on their own cruelty that they're exacting on the people that are traitors, that they decide to lock up and torture and kill. And probably more Karos Invictad and his overwhelming wealth that we find out about in this scene too, which is one of my favorite parts of the book. The coming reaction. After this, uh, Triban Gnol takes the offensive after he gets yelled at a little bit by Karos Invictad. And there's another line where it says that Triban Gnol makes a show of trying to contain his fury, which I just imagine him as like putting his hands up and going like this, and his brow bulging for a moment because of a vein that pops or something like that. But it's very tactful, in my opinion, as well as the last scene was very tactful, the way everything was described. But I found this really interesting, because I believe it shows the genius that Triban has at times, because Triban, I mean, he's kept power this entire time, and he has been very adamant and very skillful and very successful in separating the emperor from his own people and basically making himself the emperor. And I believe this shows it a little more that everything Triban does is a calculated bid for power and a bid for to intimidate people, and that's what he does. And he says one of my next favorite lines, which I'm just going to paraphrase it here, because it's a little longer, but he essentially states that he's been getting desperate missives from the Liberty Consign, in specific Rautus Hivenar, the richest man in Lether, the Letharis and the Lether Empire, wondering what the Patriotists are doing and what Karos Invictad's doing, and they've been begging Triban to summon him, for Triban to summon Karos Invictad and question him where all these funds are going. And he says one final line. He says, "And so now I have you before me, and you will answer my questions, and I will assure you, if the answers do not satisfy me, then they will not satisfy Rautus Hivenar." And I can just imagine his tone rising and rising and rising and getting angrier and angrier as he says all these words, trying to intimidate Karos Invictad. And at first, when I read this, I assumed that Karos Invictad was immediately going to go back to being this smaller man, but that is not what happens. Karos Invictad laughs at him, and he almost sneers at him, and essentially states that Rautus Hivenar is going senile, and that he's obsessed with metal trinkets he finds on the canal shoreside, which is also an interesting plotline. But before I go any further, what's interesting, or what I found so enjoyable about this, is that it really related these three characters together a little more, because Raltus Hivenar's plotline for most of this book hasn't really had anything to do with the actual politicking of the Lether Empire. His plotline's mostly been about these trinkets that he's finding. Granted, a little bit about what he's. There was that meeting he had with the Liberty Consign at one point where he had to assure them that he still had everything under control because they were questioning his skills. And at the very beginning of the book, I'm pretty sure it's the very first scene of chapter 1, he sends Venet Sathad to Dren, or Drene, or Dreen, or Drine. I've always said Dren in my head, or Drene, but he sends him there to investigate a little bit about Letter Annict, and I think a little bit about Orban Truthfinder, possibly. Forget about that. But I always found it strange how most of his plotline had nothing to actually do with the goings on of the Empire, and was more about what's going on at his own estate, and specifically the trinkets, not even anything to do with his money. And which I didn't have any problem with. I thought it was still interesting, but at the back of my head, I had this inkling. I was like, he should be one of the most important people in the Empire, with how much weight the Letheri put on wealth and money. I figure that maybe not even the Chancellor would be the strongest and most powerful, influential individual in the Empire in this instance, and it might have been Rautus Hivenar, is what I was thinking. Um, but I really like that this mentioning shows, it really reiterates to the reader, in my opinion, how important Rautus Hivenar really is, and the Liberty Consign. I think it's the Liberty Consign of Merchants, maybe. I don't think all of them are merchants. Some of them might just own enterprises like Bugs Construction. Don't we all love that company? It's definitely not a front. But but uh, obviously, after this, Karos Invictad basically drops a bombshell on the readers and on Triban that he is now the richest man of Lether. And I forget if he says it in this scene, but it's said in another that he stole this money from the people, that this is essentially stolen wealth from his investigations that he's doing. And it's made him the richest man in the Empire. And to him, he's now the most important person in the Empire. And it kind of does reinforce this idea that in Lether, wealth really is the pinnacle of everything. I mean, what pinnacle kind of is I think, an apt way of putting it, because what the richest denomination they have is a peak, and what's at the pinnacle of the peak, that those two kind of fit together pretty well. But Karos Invictad is the richest man in the Empire, and because of this, Triban actually backs off. He gets a little more somber after this, and Karos Invictad saunters away. But Karos Invictad says something. I don't know if he saunters away, but in my head, he strutted away in his mind. Kind of gloatful of the fact that he's so powerful now. But he does say something to Triban. He says that his plans include Triban, and that he need not worry about his station. That he will stay a top player in this game, which is all I this scene with the power dynamics shifting again and again and again, and then mentions of other characters that were important and then maybe are becoming less important throughout this Hivenar. I found that it was the best politicking scene in the series, and maybe not in the series, but definitely in Reaper's Gale. And I really enjoyed this power struggle that was very abrupt, and I sort of like the fake outs that happen. I wouldn't know another the subversions of expectations that you have with Triban seeming to be the one in power, and then Karos Invictad all of a sudden slamming his scepter down, but that failed. He just wasn't intimidating. But then he intimidates him not with posture at this point. He intimidates him with his wealth and the secret power that he's slowly amassed with the Patriotists. Um, I believe there's a scene at one point where Gnol tells us that Karos Invictad is a failed scholar of hers, or just in general in circles of Letheris, and she believes that that is the crux of his bid for power. And the reason that he's doing all these cruel things is that the world was cruel to him and rejected his ideas, so he's now rejecting the world and is exacting cruelty on people he doesn't like now, which was a really interesting idea that she had, and I ran with it when I read it. It was really during this book that I sort of had the idea in my mind that and I sort of it got through to me that you can't take what every character says at face value. And it's one of the things that Steven Erikson does so well when writing these characters is that they all have their own ideas, be they flawed or not. Um, no one character has the exact reason for anything, and just because one character's theorizing something about another, does not necessarily make it true. I mean, if we want to go a very direct way of looking at that, we can go all the way back to Gardens of the Moon, chapter 2, I believe, where they don't even know who is the leader of Moon Spawn, and it is Tattersail and Khallet. I forget his name. I'm pretty sure he died in that book. Um, they start reading off lines of Animandaris by Fisher Keltath, and they use that as, even though it's like an epic poem that's supposed to be sung by a bard, they use it as factual statements about Animander Rake because they know so little about him. He's a living legend, and which is definitely interesting, but just goes to show that just because what a person thinks doesn't mean it's necessarily true. We don't know how true Animandaris is. I'm assuming a lot of it's true based off of the fact that they were using it as almost a historical document for who this Lord of Moonspawn is, this Son of Darkness, Animandaris, Dragon of Purake, or no, that's his sword, Purake, um, or Purake, I don't know, Animander Rake, but I believe that applies to what Janal said with regards to Karos Invictad. So I took it with a little bit of grain of salt, although I generally, for that opinion, actually do think it's true. Most of what she said, that Karos Invictad is doing all this in part because he feels scorched and scorned by uh, the scholars among him, which is definitely an interesting idea that was presented to us, and I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed this scene between Karos Invictad and Triban. It's one of my favorite. It was one of the strongest points of this book, in my opinion, Usually, my favorite parts of these books are the fights and the roving battles that can happen at times, and I really enjoyed it in this book too. And Uruhella's death was one of my favorite scenes. Not because I enjoyed watching Uruhella die, but because it was just so heartbreaking to me. And I'm probably gonna make a video about that specific scene, maybe not entirely about Uruhella's death, but also just about the way the Malazans conducted their warfare on this part because it was definitely really, really interesting. But this whole scene with Triban, Gnol, and Karos and Invictad was very interesting to me, and I just wanted to talk about it a little bit, share my thoughts. If you have any thoughts of your own, feel free to comment. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to discuss anything. I really enjoy the series, and I really enjoy talking about it. And I hope to be done Toll the Hound soon, possibly within the week, so that I can make some videos about that, and then maybe some. I'm thinking about making a video on some stuff to do with Midnight Tides after this, the epilogue, epigraph poem that's unnamed, because I find that one very interesting. And I don't think I'll be running out of video ideas anytime soon. I've been posting one a day for 3 days now. That might continue for a little bit, maybe not too much longer, but I don't think I'll be running out of videos anytime soon. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope maybe you took away something from it, or it made you think a little more. You just enjoyed it. And like I said, comment if you wish. I will respond to them all. And thanks for watching.